Hey everyone, today I'm going to be showing you how to do this animation. This video tutorial is split into two different videos. If you're used to using After Effects and you want a real short way of doing it, then click the first video in the description and that'll take you to the shortened version of this. If you're not used to After Effects, then you're in exactly the right place. This tutorial is going to show you step by step exactly how to achieve the animation that we've just shown you. I'm going to explain it in a way that assumes that you know pretty much nothing about After Effects at all, but by the end of this video you're going to learn new tools and techniques to allow you to create something yourself. And that's why the video is a little bit longer, because I want you guys to learn as well. I'm not a complete expert myself, but the knowledge that I do have I want to share with you guys to help you get going, to get over that learning curve that I've experienced. And just before you start this video, I highly recommend that you have a pattern or design that you want to animate. In this case, I'm going to be using my logo. So if you haven't got that right now, I recommend pausing the video, just sketch something up quick, or if you've got a logo yourself that you want to use, feel free to use that too. And just to be clear, you don't need to have something in mind. You can just follow along with what I'm doing, but it won't be 100% accurate with straight lines and angles coming together and things like that. But you can still quite easily follow along with this video. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is open After Effects. From here then, select New Project. It'll take you to this screen and then press New Composition. Okay, from here we're going to call the composition anything that you like. In this case I'm going to call it Main Composition. And we want to change the width and height to 4K. So we've got the maximum pixels to work with, which is 3840 by 2160. And we want to make sure that we lock aspect ratio to 16:9. You can change the frame rate to anything you want. I'm going to keep it at 30 frames a second here. Full resolution, and this is where we select how long that we actually want the animation to be. In this case, I'm going to change it to 4 seconds. Actually, no, let's change it to 3 seconds. Okay, and then you can also select the background color here as well. So you can use a picker tool to select absolutely any color that you want. So I've got this logo here, I can select the gold. But in this case, you can use a slider, enter a hex code or an RGB value as well. But in this case, I'm just going to make it fully white and select OK. So this will bring you to your main composition. As you can see on the left hand side there, under the project tab, you'll have main composition. This composition is just this area, this workspace with everything underneath it. And the first thing that we're going to do is actually create a new composition. So you can press Command and N for a new composition. And this is going to be the logo. So we want to change this. We'll keep the same aspect ratio and we want to change this to something smaller. Bear in mind this has got to tile across. So I'm going to change it to 600 pixels. And I'm going to press OK. So you can see now we've got composition 1 and main composition and composition 1 that you can see down the bottom here. So when you double click main composition or composition 1, it goes to the relevant one in the working space down at the bottom. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to drag in a logo that we're going to work with. You can see this is the logo that I've got here and we want it to be central. Now I'm going to resize it because it's a little bit small. And when you're doing this, you can see that the height and the width adjust separately. So if you hold the Shift button, you can actually scale that up. And this is going to be one of the icons. So I want to make it reasonably big, but I want to make sure that I'm leaving a nice white gap the whole way around. And this is so that the animations don't overlap and it looks a lot more professional. From here, then you want to select the pen tool. And what we're doing is we're going to try and trace the outline of this. So we'll start there and you can see that it creates a shape layer as we do this. We want to click to the next joint, create a straight line, down to the next one and finish up the top. And you can see it's tried to fill something in here. Don't worry about that, we'll come back to that. Just click the one at the top and we've traced this M. If you don't have this logo, just make this shape anyway. You don't need the image underneath. And then what we'll do, we'll press this little drop down and this is controlling this shape layer. We'll go into content and you can see shape 1 is the shape that we've just created. If you go down to fill, we can change the opacity of the fill down to 0. And what that's going to do is get rid of that fill. So now we'll just have this line. But this line currently has a property of 0 width as well. So that's the next thing that we're going to change. We're going to go into stroke. We're going to select the color of the stroke to actually match that same gold that we've imported. Or you can use the picker tools to select exactly what we said before, with an RGB or a hex code, or you can select any color within there. We're going to change the stroke width to something a bit thicker, but you can see here, I can't see that I'm making it the exact same width as the image underneath. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to transform the image and bring the opacity down. And then you can see now, I can see the thickness of the line over it, and I'm pretty much there. It looks relatively good. So I'll close that one and reopen. And I'll just have a little play with this value just to make sure I get it about right. Yeah, that seems right to me. But you can see now that the corners are really pointy. And we're just going to adjust these corners here to get them really in line. You just click and drag these. Great, that's looking good. But the corners are pointy and I'm missing a bit at the bottom here. So I'll make the line cap round, which finishes off the ends. And I'll also make the line join, instead of a miter joint, I'll actually make that round as well. And what that will do now is literally create a line over the top. Great, that's that one. We're going to select the shape layer again with the pen tool and do the exact same thing for the second one. So click, go all the way up to the next cap, click, down to the bottom, click, and then back up to the top. And you can see it copies the same thing from the previous one, but now we've got shape 1 and shape 2. So we're going to go into shape 2 because that's the second one that we've drawn. We're going to go into stroke. The color's still the same as we know, but the line we're going to make round, and the cap and the join, sorry, we're going to make both round. And then we're just going to adjust this a little bit by clicking and dragging these points. And you can see that that looks great. So what I'm going to do now is close the shape layer. If you take the shape layer on and off by toggling the eye, you can see that this looks pretty good that we've got now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this because we don't need this anymore. And there we go. We have a new logo. So I'm going to open the shape layer back up and collapse everything. So we've just got shape 1 and shape 2, which we know, which we've just drawn under the shape layer container. So now we're going to select shape 2 and add, click the little button next to add. Sorry, we'll do shape 1 first. We're going to add. So we're going to select trim path. And what this will do when we open the container back up in shape 1, you can see I've got trim path. I've got a start and an end. So by adjusting these values, you can see how they move. And end goes from the other direction. And this is how we're going to make the animation. So we're going to change that to 0 and change that to 0. So you can see I've got no path at all there, no line shown. I'm going to go in a few frames on the line by dragging the header. You can see I've dragged the header to roughly about 15 frames in. And I'm going to press this little clock. This adds a keyframe. This keyframe just stores a piece of information to say, at this point in the time frame, I want this value. So move the head along and change the end to 100. And you can see now I've got two keyframes, one at the start and one at the end. So when I press the spacebar, you can see that it actually animates between the two values, the end value being 100 and the beginning value being 0. And that's how it animates. So then I'll want that to be 100 for quite a while, and then around about here, I want the same value to be 100. So I'm going to press the little button here that you can see. This just adds a keyframe at the current value, which in this case is 100. And then roughly 15 frames before the end, about, I want this to be 0, back down to nothing. Okay, so let's go back to the front and play that through. You can see, oh, it goes the wrong way. So why is that? And that's because we've played with the end value and not the start value. So what we need to do is actually put these on the start value line, not the end value line. So you can see here, I'm going to change this to starting at 0, which is the opposite of the other one. and then go back over to here and put this one as 100. And you'll see that it's actually animating forward, which is exactly what we want. 98, just change this to 100, great, and it adds in them 2 keyframes, and then the 2 underneath on the end we will remove. So now you'll see one animates and animates away, great, but it still seems a little bit blocky, and this is because of how it's playing the animation. It's currently playing the animation in a real linear way. So what we're going to do is do the same for shape 2. We'll shape 2, add, trim path, open it up, find the start and the end, but because this path's the other way round, you can see that we might have to do this the opposite way round. And the best way to do this is just play with the start and end values as I've just been doing to see which way round this is going to animate and which way round you need it. The good thing is I can see the keyframes from below, so I can line these up to make sure they match. I want the end at 100, move across, and at this point I want the end to be 0. No, sorry, this one's the wrong, isn't it? So I want to change the start path. Yes, I want it to animate at 100 and come in the opposite way to match. So I'll go start 100, and you can see now when I change this to 0, it animates the correct way that I'm after. It has the keyframe, then I want the end one to be 100, and then at the other one 0, which is basically opposite of what we've just done. You can see now I've got 8 keyframes, and when I play this, there we go. You can see that animates in and animates out. And then a few frames either side of white space really make it look like it's endlessly repeating. But you can see these, it's a little bit blocky, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to select all of these. Oh, sorry, I can't select the others because the shape is thing, but I'll come to them. So you go to Keyframe Assistant and something called Easy Ease. And then what Easy Ease does is actually does a small ramp of animation between the start and the end. And it just looks a bit more professional. It doesn't look as robotic. You might not be able to see it on this one, but I'll go and change that for the other shape. So we'll go back into shape 1, close shape 2, back into shape 1, and highlight the other 4. Right click, Keyframe Assistant, Easy Ease, and that's how we do it. And now, when I play, you can see the slow ramp up and the slow ramp down. And it just looks a lot more professional than the other one. And there we go, we've got an animation. So we're going to close the shape layer. And you see that is composition 1. And what we're going to do is go into the main composition. But first, sorry, I'm going to rename composition 1 just so it's something a bit easier for us to remember. So you right click, press rename. In this case, I'm going to name it small logo. I'm then going to go into the main composition, which I'm in at the bottom, and I'm going to drag small logo in onto the main composition. And then what you'll see is that will animate as a small logo inside the main composition because of the size difference. So I'm going to go roughly in the middle of it just so I can see what's happening. And then if you go to the effects on the right hand side, effects and presets, and you want to type in tile, and then we are after something called motion tile. And motion tile will repeat this animation up and down. So we drag that directly onto here, and you can see we can adjust the output width, how wide the whole thing's going to go, and the output height. Great, and you can see all that's done is just repeat the same animation on height and width. We're not going to mess with phase just now, but what we can do is if we play that animation now, you can see, great, it plays them all. Starting to look real good. Okay, so again, I'll just put the playhead there just so I can see everything. But I want to rotate this, so if we press the drop down, go to transform, I'm going to change the opacity a little lower so it looks more like a background and doesn't take us away from the main background. And I'm going to adjust the rotation just so the lines, them 2 lines there, so they look horizontal. Because I just think that looks nice. No reason why, except it looks nice. But you can see now that the height, it doesn't actually cover the corners. So what we need to do is we need to go and adjust the height of this to get rid of that white space underneath. So there's two ways. You can go into the effects, into motion tile, and that brings up the exact same information down here as it does up there. So there's two ways of getting to it, because this is effect controls in a panel there, or we can go into the subcategories of this. So what we're going to do now is go into output height and make sure that that covers the corners. And there we have it. We now have a real nice animating background. I think the lines look really good on this one. So next we want the main logo that goes in the middle. And what we're going to do now is we're going to create a new composition, almost like a new layer in Photoshop. And we're going to call this center logo. We're going to make this 1920 by 1080. You can see it's not quite 1080, so I'm going to unlock that, put 1080 in and press lock and press OK. So a 1080p image on a 4K will look quite nice. So this is the new center logo composition that we have. Click and hold the square tool to make a circle. We're going to click and drag a circle, but you can see at the moment if I press this, you can toggle the background. So at the moment we have a transparent background. So I'm going to click and drag and make a circle. If you hold the shift key again, it makes it a perfect circle. But you can see that the anchor point where everything will move from is actually up there. So the way we get around this is we press Command Option and double click the option that you can see there, and this will put the anchor point into the middle. So now we've got a nice circle and we'll align it into the middle. We'll drag in our logo. You can see the logo is really big. So what we're going to do is just going to zoom out slightly by pressing this little drop down here, or you can just use the mouse pad to zoom out. I'm going to click that, and again I'm going to hold shift whilst doing this after clicking to bring it down so it looks about right, and that looks about right there. Great. So now we can see this is what it looks like, and now we want to animate this. So I'm going to press the drop down and fit to bring it back to where it was. And what I'm going to do is go into the main composition, click project up here, sorry. I'm going to get the center logo and I'm going to bring that into the main composition. So now we have small logo and center logo. But center logo needs to be on top of small logo so that when we have a look at it, you can see it's actually physically on top during the preview there. And we're pretty much there now. We're actually getting there with this. So what we're going to do now is we're going to start animating center logo. So we want a shadow effect. So we're going to drag this effect on top of the center logo, similar to what we did with small logo, like that. And now we have all of these shadow effects. So what I'm going to do is take the opacity of the item that I don't want, and I'm going to take it the whole way down to 0. I don't want the second halo for this. You can experiment if you want it for yours, but I'm just going to use the first halo. I'm going to increase the distance so it looks like it's coming away from the object. About there looks good. I'm going to increase the softness so it doesn't have such a sharp edge on it. And I'm also going to change the shadow background to a grey colour. Black's a bit too harsh, and you can see this grey. We can have a look at what we think's about right, and that's light grey will do. Yeah, about there. Okay, we'll select that. And we'll just adjust the angle if we want. I think about there looks right for me. So first, we'll go into transform of the center logo. That transforms the whole thing. And right at the beginning of the animation, we want to change the scale and the opacity. So we want the scale to be really small down. And we also want the opacity to be 0. So we don't want it visible at the beginning of the frame. We'll then move in, and that's where the other animation, the small logo animation, starts. So this is where we want ours to start. Maybe, actually, we want it to end about there. So we'll create another keyframe at this point. About just before, yeah, about there. So we'll make the scale back to 100, so that's what we want. And we also want the opacity at 100 at that point too. So then what we can do is have a look at what that looks like. Okay, it's growing, but it doesn't look quite right for some reason. And that's because we want this little bounce in. So we want the 100%. Great. Okay, that's looking better. I've changed the move. You can just drag the keyframes wherever you need to. And what I'm going to do here now is add another keyframe in here for the scale for 100 to actually make it bounce, as you've seen in our animation. So what I'll do now is go whoosh, bounce, and I want it to bounce exactly at this point. So what I'll do is I'll change this one here to a little bit larger, 115%. Then we'll see it goes up and back down. Just want to adjust the speed a little bit so it shrinks back down quicker. There we go. Maybe a bit more. Change this one, come back a little bit. Let's see what this looks like. And every time you change the keyframe, it'll automatically adjust the animation in the middle. So what we're going to do now is highlight all of these points, right click, keyframe assistant and easy ease, just to make it appear better than what it currently does. Let's see what that looks like. Yep, looking much better. So now we're going to work on the shadow. So what I want to do is about here, and I don't want the shadow to be visible, so I'm going to change the opacity of the shadow, click the little keyframe and change it all the way down to 0. I don't want the shadow to be visible there. And about here, we're going to change the opacity and put it back to 100. So the shadow actually appears as the logo appears, which makes it look a bit more realistic. Okay, and now because the logo grows and shrinks, I actually want the drop shadow to go further away from the logo and then back closer to the logo. Here, we will start to animate the distance, and we'll put a keyframe in there. Here's its highest point, so we want the value to be higher. We'll just drag it up to about there, and then back here we want it back to the original value, which is 66. And there we go. So now the shadow will move away. Great. Now we're going to highlight these, right click, keyframe assistant, easy ease, just so it matches the others. So now we've got all of these keyframes. So we're going to highlight them all. We're going to copy, Command C. We're going to put the playhead about here, Command V, right click, keyframe assistant, time reverse keyframes. And what that's doing is putting all of them keyframes that we've just done back in reverse, so it does everything again, but backwards. But you can see it doesn't look quite right on the reverse, so what we're going to do is we're going to move these. Oops, sorry, yep, we're going to highlight all of these. We're going to move them so that it ends at the end of the actual animation. Let's see what that looks like now. Okay, it looks better, but the opacity is still a little bit off here. So we will move. So let's see what's about here. Yeah, the opacity is not quite right there. So what we're going to do is select the opacity. You can see, oh, whoops, I've moved the whole thing. Sorry, this is a mistake. Click, there we go. So click the one keyframe and move that down to the end. Click the other keyframe and move that down to the end. So let's have a look at that, how that looks. Great, that's getting there, yep. Okay, yeah, this looks good. So the other thing I want to do is just adjust the scale so that the logo is not quite as big. As it shrinks out, you can see, there we go. And you can keep playing with this until you're happy with how you think it looks. Okay, so that's it. And the last thing we need to do is it currently doesn't have a background. You can export it like this if you want a transparent background. Otherwise, we just need to still add a white background. So we go to the shape tool, we click and hold this and we can get the rectangle tool back. We then create a big rectangle, and what we want to do is hold shift again just to drag this rectangle as big as we can. Great, so it fills the whole size. It doesn't really matter if it's central or not, but what we will do is go to align center, center, just so it covers the whole thing. Yes, it does in this case, great. So put it back to fit, and then we want the rectangle to be at the bottom because we want that to be the bottom layer. So just drag that to the bottom, and we'll see now, if we press the I, we can either have a transparent background or a white background, and we can export these two different files very simply so then you've got one transparent one and one with a white background. So the way we do that is go File, Export, Add to Media Encoder Queue. This will then launch Adobe Media Encoder. Once this is launched, if you click the Match Source section here, you can see now you can select whatever you want. In this case, I'm going to select high quality 4K. This gives us the maximum render quality. Make sure you take the maximum render quality, and you can see the rough file size is 30 megabytes. Click the output name, select where you want to put it. In this case, I'll just put it on the desktop and call this main composition 1. Great, and hit export. Hit OK, then press play, and it will export for you. And you can see the little preview down the bottom has the white background, and it's animating. And there we go, it's complete. Then to do it with a transparent background, we unselect the visible layer so you can see it's transparent. You go File, Export, Add to Media Encoder Queue, exactly the same. But in this case, we want to export something called the alpha channel. So what we'll do is when we're in this view, we will select QuickTime. And the preset that we're after is GoPro Cineform 12-bit with alpha. And the alpha channel is the clear transparent channel. And if you scroll down here in video, you can see that it's 12-bit plus alpha, and that's what we want to make sure is selected. Select maximum render quality, select its name. So I'm saying with alpha, and click OK, and then click play, and that will export the alpha one. So the main difference that you can see in the bottom here is that now it has a black background, which it's exporting as actually a transparent background. Black's just the way that Media Encoder represents this. And there we have it, we're done. So yeah, that was the tutorial. I hope you guys liked it, and if you did, please feel free to buy me a coffee. It's the first link in the description below. Give this video a thumbs up and make sure you subscribe, and I'll see you next time.